The Prophet ﷺ said that from the people before, there were 3 people who were going on a journey. And whilst they're going on this journey, it begins to rain. So they take shelter in a cave. And whilst they're taking shelter in the cave, a rock comes down and it covers the mouth of the cave. So they begin to push the rock, but the rock doesn't move. Then they decide, they're tired, they're exhausted, and they decide now to lie down and, death befalls them. And then one of them stood up. And he said, "Oh Allah, I had elderly parents. And what I would do every night before I would go to sleep is that I would give my parents milk to drink. One day I went to look for fodder, and I went further than I normally do. And by the time I came back, my elderly parents had gone to sleep. And my children were still awake, they were hungry, but I didn't feel it befitting that I feed my children before I feed my parents. So I told my wife to put the children to sleep, and she put them to sleep hungry. And I stood by the bed of my parents with the bowl. And when they woke up in the morning, I gave them the milk. He said, "Oh Allah, if you know that I done this action solely for your sake, then move the rock." And the rock moves a bit, but not enough for them to come out. And then the second man stands up. And he says, "Oh Allah, I had a cousin, and I was infatuated with this cousin of mine. There was no woman on the face of this earth that I loved more than this cousin. And I had made a move on her many times, but every time she turned me down. But one day she was in desperate need of money, and she came to me. And I said, on the condition that you allow me to have a relationship with you. You allow me to have a relationship with you." And she agreed because she was in desperate need of the money. And he said, just when I was about to have a relationship, she said to me, "Ittaqillah." She said, "Fear Allah, fear Allah. Do not break the seal unless you are the rightful owner," meaning the husband. She said, when she said this, the fear of Allah permeated my heart, and I moved back. I moved back, and I gave her the money. And he said, "Oh Allah, if you know that I did this solely for your sake, then remove the rock." And the rock moved, but not enough for them to come out. And then the third person stood up. And he said, "Oh Allah, I hired a group of people. And when it came to the end of the day, one of the people, he didn't collect his wages. So I invested his wages until there was a whole valley of cattle and livestock. That's how much it grew. And one day this man came to me. And he said, I'm desperately in need of that day's wages. And I took him to the valley and I said, you see all this? This belongs to you. And he said, you're having a laugh. He said, I'm desperately in need. Don't joke with me. He said, I invested that day's wages and this is how it mushroomed. All this is yours. And he said, oh Allah, if you know that I done this deed and this action solely for your sake, then remove the rock. And the rock moved. And all three of them came out. All three of them came out. I ask yourself, and I ask myself, If me and you were the fourth person in that cave, by what action that we've done in our life would we ask Allah to remove the rock? And if we haven't, then we need to aspire before our time is up. We need to make a change. We need to work within our communities. We need to make our our masajid vibrant. We need to become educated. We need to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our focus. Whatever we do, our businesses, as a community, we need to be united. We need to throw away these trivial issues, these issues which divide us, and there are many things which unite us, and we need to become strong as a community. Motivated for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have a vision for yourself and have a vision for your children. It doesn't necessarily mean that you change the world overnight. No. If every single person's home, you had an Islamic ethos in it. You brought up your children in a good manner. Children who feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we would have a strong community. We would have a strong community. So we endeavor and we aspire to do something, when on the day of judgment, when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that maybe just because of that action, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to go into Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who aspire for His sake. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who, whatever we do, it is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our children people of piety. May Allah make us people of piety. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restore within this ummah the greatness that they once had. And may Allah keep us united in dunya and reunite us in Jannatul Firdaus. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.